Welcome to another deep dive. And this one takes us into the heart of a mystery that really gripped the Vosges mountains of France back in 1977.
Oh, the beast of the Vosges.
That's right, the beast of the Vosges, a case that left locals and authorities baffled and, frankly, terrified.
Yeah, it's a pretty creepy one.
There really was. Something was out there attacking livestock.
Yeah.
But not just your typical predator. This wasn't just about animal attacks.
Right.
It became this whole thing, this mystery, fear, and clash between what people thought they knew, the rational, and, well, the unknown.
You know, you've got a point there. This case, it blends all these different kinds of evidence. You have official reports from the gendarmerie.
Right.
But then you also have personal stories, eyewitness accounts, and even folklore gets mixed in. It's fascinating. It's like a puzzle, but it's as much about, how people perceived what was happening as it is about whatever animal might have been behind it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's like how much of it is what they're actually seeing and how much of it is what they're afraid of seeing.
Exactly.
Well, let's get into it. Let's start with those first attacks.
Okay.
And we're not just talking about some, missing chickens in a coop. Reports describe sheep and cattle found dead, not just from your average predator, but with really strange, almost surgical injuries.
Yeah, and the reports, some of them even mention puncture wounds, but not just any puncture wounds. We're talking deep, precise, almost like, I don't know, some kind of tool was used.
And that's what I think is so creepy. What could inflict that kind of wound on an animal?
It's pretty bizarre, and what's even stranger is that there often weren't any tracks at the scene.
Right.
Which is weird. For a large predator, that's not typical at all.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. And the sheer number of animals killed in some cases, it just didn't add up. It wasn't typical predator behavior. Like usually a predator takes down what it needs,
Yeah.
This was different. It was as if whatever was doing this wasn't just hungry, it was methodical. It had a purpose.
So people obviously start freaking out, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I would be freaking out if I was a farmer there at the time.
Absolutely.
But the authorities take it seriously, too. And they launch what they called an encirclement of the massif.
Encirclement of the massif. What does that even mean?
Okay, so picture this. Experienced trackers, soldiers, even helicopters, all combing those mountains, the Vosges mountains, trying to corner this thing, this elusive beast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they took it really seriously.
They really did, and I think the encirclement, it involved some pretty intense strategies.
Oh, yeah.
They used what's called a grid search pattern, where they basically divide the whole area into zones and systematically search each one. But here's the thing. The Vosges is densely forested, steep slopes, rocky outcrops, trying to find a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah.
But the haystack is on fire. It's a tough environment.
And they didn't find it?
Nope. The creature just vanished.
Like it knew they were coming?
Yeah. I know, right? And we even have records, actual financial records, showing how much those military operations cost. And let me tell you, it wasn't cheap.
Wow, that's really interesting. It really shows you how seriously they were taking this. It wasn't just, oh, let's go out for a jaunt in the woods and see if we can spot this thing.
No, they were invested.
Okay, so we have all this going on. People are freaked out. The authorities are taking it super seriously. They're sending out the army. They're dropping, big money on it.
Yeah.
And then you have Madame Ronfaux. She was living right in the heart of the Vosges, and she describes seeing this large, dark creature stalking her property.
Oh, gosh.
Imagine...
That would be terrifying.
I know.
Yeah.
Imagine seeing that out your window and knowing it was the same thing responsible for all of those brutal attacks.
Her letter, it's chilling. It really brings home how terrifying this whole thing was.
Oh, yeah.
She even mentioned finding a dog, but its throat was torn out.
Ugh.
I know, right? And they echoes what we see in those official reports. So it wasn't just about livestock anymore.
It felt like a threat to people.
Absolutely.
And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
There's so much more to uncover. We're going to explore how the public reacted, what theories people had, the cultural impact of this whole case, and it's about to get even more intriguing.
I can't wait.
Okay, so as these attacks keep happening, people start trying to figure out what this thing could be. And the theories get pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
Some people thought it was a wolf-dog hybrid, which I guess kind of makes sense because there had been wolves in the Vosges before.
Right.
Others thought maybe it was an escaped lynx. But then there were these more out-there ideas.
It's funny how, when something can't be easily explained, people jump to these really exotic explanations.
Yeah.
But let's think about that wolf-dog hybrid theory for a second. hybridization, it is possible. But the Vosges region, they hadn't actually had a confirmed wolf sighting in years.
Oh, wow.
And when you look at those reports, the number of animals killed and the way they were killed, those precise injuries, it just doesn't fit how even the most aggressive wolf dog would behave.
So it's like the mystery itself was making the speculation even worse.
Exactly.
It pushed people to consider all these possibilities, things outside of what they knew. And, the lack of evidence just added to that frenzy. It was like trying to grasp at smoke.
Yeah, it's common in these kinds of cases. When we come up against something we don't understand, our brains try to fill in those blanks.
Right.
And we often draw on things like folklore, stories we've heard, cultural narratives. And the Vosges, that region, has all these tales of strange creatures and wild beasts.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense.
So it's not surprising that people's imaginations just went wild.
Well, let's talk about how the people living through all this were feeling. Imagine being a farmer in the Vosges back then.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Your livelihood depends on those animals, and suddenly you have this predator, something you don't even understand, terrorizing the whole region. I can only imagine the anxiety.
The anxiety was definitely real. And we see it reflected in a letter from the Centre départemental des jeunes agriculteurs, which was like a farmers association.
Okay.
And this letter, it wasn't just about their fear.
Right.
It was about the economic impact those attacks were having.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, it's their business.
Exactly. They're losing their animals, their income, their sense of security, and they're demanding that someone does something.
So what were they asking for? What did they want to be done?
Well, they had a bunch of ideas, some more practical than others. Some wanted more patrols, bounties on the creature, things like that.
Makes sense.
Others thought maybe they should call the wild dogs in the area, thinking maybe they were part of the problem.
Okay.
And some even called for military-grade weapons to be used.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can see just how desperate they were getting.
That's really interesting. It's crazy how this one creature caused so much disruption. And I don't just mean the attacks.
Right.
I mean, the social and economic fabric of the whole region was affected.
It was a big deal. And this wasn't some isolated event either. That fear, it spread way beyond the Vosges. It became this national sensation. Newspapers all over France had headlines about the beast. People everywhere were debating what it could be. This wasn't just about livestock anymore. It was tapping into this deeper fear of the unknown, this reminder that we're not always in control of everything.
And then there's the folk song, Le Garou.
Oh, yeah.
It comes from the Vosges folklore.
Right.
This haunting melody, the lyrics talking about some fearsome beast in the night, it adds this whole other layer to the story. What do you make of that song? Like, what was its significance, especially with everything else happening?
I think folk songs, they often reflect what a community is feeling, their anxieties and fears.
It's like a mirror.
Yeah, exactly. And Le Garou, this wasn't just entertainment.
Right.
It was an expression of how terrified people were.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It spoke to that, ancient human fear of the wild, of the things we can't control.
Okay, so it wasn't just telling a story. It was reflecting a real fear.
Right.
And this brings us to the peak of the investigation, where the French army gets really involved. We see all these detailed agreements about sending soldiers, helicopters, experts.
It's a huge operation.
It sounds like a movie.
I know. And it's crazy because even with all that, they couldn't catch it. They couldn't figure out what it was.
So it was like it was playing with them almost.
Kind of. It would appear and disappear whenever it wanted. It left this trail of carnage and confusion. They had all the resources, all those people, and they still couldn't catch it.
And the more they tried to figure it out,
The more elusive it became.
exactly. And that brings us to Lieutenant Loutre Claudel's final report, which is pretty chilling. What did he find?
His report describes how he found 9 sheep.
9 sheep.
9 sheep slaughtered, all in one night.
Oh my gosh.
And he described the scene in such detail, the injuries, the pattern of the attack, but there were no tracks, nothing. And that just adds to the mystery of it all.
It's like a horror movie.
It is. And with that report, the investigation pretty much ends. No real answers, no captured creature, just a ton of unanswered questions. And those questions, they're still echoing in the Vosges Mountains today.
So we've gone through all these reports. We've seen the eyewitness accounts. And we've even looked at that really creepy folk song.
That's a strange one, isn't it?
It is. And through it all, the Beast of the Vosges, it remains this total enigma. It just terrorized this whole region and then poof, gone, vanished. What do you think happened?
That's what I find so fascinating about this case, the fact that it just stopped. Those attacks, they just ended,
Yeah.
as suddenly as they began. And it makes you think, If this was just some lone animal, some hungry creature, wouldn't we expect to see more? Wouldn't it have kept attacking?
I mean, you'd think so, and we've discussed all the theories, right?
Right.
We talked about the wolf-dog hybrid,
Yeah.
the escaped lynx,
hmm
but I don't know, something about them just doesn't sit right.
None of them really fit all the facts.
Exactly. The missing tracks, the amount of carnage, those wounds,
The wounds were really something else.
they were. It's like something out of a horror movie.
I know, right? It all points to something beyond what we normally see, beyond the ordinary. And this is where things get really interesting, where science, what we know, it kind of bumps up against the unexplained. Could there be explanations that are outside of what we know about animals, outside of zoology? I'm not saying it was aliens or some mythical creature.
Right.
But what if there's stuff about animals, how they behave, or even, I don't know, maybe even species we haven't discovered yet, things we just haven't documented?
It's easy to dismiss those ideas.
Yeah.
But when you look at the evidence, or lack of evidence, I guess I should say, it does make you wonder.
It does.
And that's what makes this case so interesting to me. It makes us really think about what we know, what we don't know, and accept that there are still places out there where these mysteries endure.
I think about the people living there at the time. Can you imagine what that was like for them? Farmers, they were afraid for their animals, their livelihoods. People wouldn't even go into the forest anymore, a place that was probably familiar to them. It had become this source of dread.
It really got under their skin.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just about animal attacks.
No.
It was about this feeling of being vulnerable. It was a reminder that even today, there are still things out there, things we don't understand, things that can threaten our sense of security.
And that fear, it wasn't just confined to the Vosges.
Right, it spread.
It spread. The beast, it became a national news story. Everyone was trying to figure out what it was. And the case, it became this mirror, reflecting all these anxieties about the unknown, about things that are outside of our control.
It's so interesting how it tapped into those primal fears. The beast, it became this symbol for all the wild, untamed things out there, things that can disrupt our lives, reminding us that we're not always in charge. So here's something to think about. What if this mystery, the beast of the Vosges, what if it's not meant to be solved? What if the point of digging into all of this isn't to find all the answers, but to sort of sit with the mystery, to accept that some questions may never be fully answered?
That's a really good point. Maybe the best stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers. The Beast of the Vosges, I think it reminds us that the world is still full of amazing things, mysterious things.
Yeah.
And the unknown, it can be scary, but it can also be pretty exciting.
I think that's a perfect place to end this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explore the shadows. And remember, the truth, it's out there.
Yeah.
Somewhere.